Hi, I'm Tom Pratt, legal counsel here at Summize, and this is a quick dive into the EU AI Act and what it means for in-house legal and whether you need to be worried about it and next steps in terms of learning more about it. So the EU AI Act is essentially the EU's first comprehensive framework for actually regulating AI and the work that it does. So the aim is to actually make sure that AI systems are used safely and transparently, particularly in high-risk areas in terms of decision-making on employment, public education, and access to services as well. Like GDPR, it doesn't just apply to EU-based companies, it can also apply to you if your AI systems or outputs are used within the EU, even if you're based in the US or UK. So it doesn't necessarily just apply to all businesses. The important thing is to actually understand whether the act's applicable to you, because it doesn't just regulate all AI, it's only specific use cases based on risk and the decisions that are actually being taken. So while it's got a relatively broad reach, in practice, the strictest requirements will only actually apply to a relatively small number of high-risk use cases. So for a lot of organizations, the impact is actually going to be much more minimal and more targeted than the actual initial headlines suggest. So in-house teams actually need to care about it because even if you're not just building with AI, you're 100% using it. So you may not be an AI company yourselves, but you'll be using most likely AI in some element of the work you're doing. AI at the moment is embedded into so many different tools, as we've seen at the moment, particularly across your contracting workflows, procurement, legal, tech, and also potentially employment as well. So things like contract review, risk scoring, supplier evaluation, recruitment, there's often AI actually sitting behind those processes now, some that you may not even be aware of. So if your organization is relying on those outputs to make decisions, then you're definitely accountable for the way that that's used. I'd say the biggest shift is actually about scrutiny. So even while the AI Act scope is narrow, like we've just spoken about, it shows that expectations are increasing both from governments and regulators and also internally as well, focusing on businesses. We're already seeing that enforcement on things like data use and transparency is relatively commonplace now. And at the same time, legal teams are getting more and more questions from the business in terms of how they're using AI, what the risk is, and if it can be explained if a challenge was to occur. So it's much less about the actual theoretical compliance and more about the practical day-to-day in terms of how you're actually using AI as a business and being able to answer those questions confidently if they're ever posed from the regulator. At this stage, it's really just about getting visibility. So it's a great idea for legal teams to understand where AI is actually being used across the business, particularly in the vendors that you're using and different tools as well, and where it's actually influencing decisions. So from there, once you actually understand how it's being used, you can start to actually identify and prioritize higher risk areas, review your contracts, and put some basic governance in place, whether that is contractual or also internal. So it doesn't need to be overly complex at this stage, but you definitely do need a clear view of what's going on and how AI is being used within your business. So you can actually read the fuller article on our website to find out more about the EU AI Act and actions that in-house teams need to actually follow and start to take.